Gadget's field trip.
We're going on a visit.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Come on, let's go with him.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
What's that, you ask? What is it?
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Well, no one wants to miss it.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
We're going on a visit.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Come on, let's go with
New
him.
places, new faces. Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Inspector Gadget's field trip.
Inspector Gadget here in Washington, D.C., a city that didn't happen accidentally, though parts of it look that way. The capital of the United States was built to be the showplace of the country. Behind me you see either the world's largest telephone pole or the Washington Monument. Choose one. D.C. stands for the District of Columbia. It first got its name from Christopher Columbus, which sounds a little like Columbia. He was one of the first Europeans to land on the shores of the Americas, even though he thought he was in the East Indies. But the people appointed to plan the nation's new capital decided to name it Washington in honor of President George Washington. Then everybody just started calling the place Washington, D.C. People would rather visit Washington, D.C. than live here. Each year, 20 million tourists come to visit the more than 600,000 people who actually live here. You can spot the tourists. They're those 20 million with the cameras. This is where the big boss of the U.S. lives. The president is the chief executive elected to lead the 50 states. The president lives in this big White House. Guess what they call it? The White House. Hope some future president doesn't want to change the color. The Lavender House wouldn't have the same regal quality to it, but it would still be located at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. The White House was burned and damaged during the War of 1812. After its reconstruction in 1817, the walls were repainted white, just like they are today. This is the oldest public building in Washington and a really big home. Only the first family lives there, even though there's room for a second, third, and fourth family. The White House has 132 rooms, including the green room, the red room, and the blue room. The only president who never lived in the White House was George Washington. He died on December 14th, 1799, a year before it was completed. So we'll never know what color room he wanted. My keen detective sense tells me we're back at the Washington Monument. They must have gotten a real deal on white paint. I guess this is where Washington lived. It's 897 steps from top to bottom. Hope he wasn't into midnight snacks. Wait a minute. It says this monument wasn't completed until 1884. Washington couldn't have lived here. He was still dead. Actually, the Washington Monument was made to honor the first president and stands as the tallest obelisk in the world. As you may have guessed, an obelisk is a tall, pointy structure. This is the only skyscraper in Washington because the city planners didn't want anything except the Washington Monument to be taller than the Capitol building. Besides, they ran out of stairs. When they first put the elevator in, women and children weren't allowed to ride it because it was considered unsafe. Now women and children get to take the same risk as men. Luckily for all, the elevator ride is very safe. So they tell me. There are 50 flags surrounding the Washington Monument, representing the 50 United States. On a windy day, you can't hear yourself for all the flag flapping. The flags aren't the only thing flapping. The monument sways 1/8 of an inch in 35-mile-per-hour winds. I, on the other hand, sway 2.5 feet in only 10-mile-per-hour winds. Now to examine another forefather, Thomas Jefferson, one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Third President of the United States. I always heard you were larger than life, but this is ridiculous. And now an Inspector Gadget field trip fact. The White House used to be called the President's House or Executive Mansion. But over the years, newspaper reporters nicknamed it the White House. Clearly, newspapermen have too much time on their hands. Then in 1901, President Theodore Roosevelt officially changed the name to the White House. They have all these reflecting pools to make the city seem twice as big. At least they make the city twice as wet. The Supreme Court is a serious place to reflect on the laws of the land. It consists of 9 justices in long robes who meet and decide the nation's most important cases. It appears that court is in session. Those 2 brass doors together weigh 15 tons. Wowzers! I wonder if they are meant to keep us out or to keep them in. Maybe they're just to keep the wind from whipping up their gowns. Many streets here are named for letters of the alphabet, all 25 of them. Hey, our alphabet has 26 letters. J is missing. No one is quite sure why, but legend has it that Pierre Lafont, the French architect who designed D.C., had a fight with John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So he dropped J Street. After I Street, it goes straight to K Street. This is called the Lincoln Memorial. What a coincidence! I have a penny that looks just like this. So, if you can't go to Washington, just have your picture taken with a penny. There's Honest Abe Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. He was born in a log cabin, but he came a long way. Just look at this place. The Lincoln Memorial was built in 1922 and has 36 marble columns representing the states of the Union that Lincoln held together. There are 56 steps leading up to the Lincoln Memorial. Some say one was for each year Lincoln was alive. Here we are in Arlington National Cemetery, the resting place of those honored for dying while in the service of the United States. We are witnessing the famous changing of the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Time to relax and enjoy the beautiful scenery around the tidal basin, like a lot of paddle boats. While every everything in Washington can be thought of as a national treasure, I'm in search of some real treasure, like cash. My Uncle Moneybags Gadget made a pile of cash. Then they took away his photocopy machine. This is the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. That's a fancy name for a money-making place. They print up money, and it's even legal as long as it's tender. It's where the paper money is printed. Only it's not paper, it's cloth, which is made up of 75% cotton and 25% linen. It's supposed to make our money last longer, as long as you don't spend it. Would you believe they transform these blank sheets into millions of dollars? The Bureau of Engraving and Printing prints $66 billion a year. I've got a great idea. Let's put them on night shifts. Then they can pay off my parking tickets from my last field trip. On average, dollar bills need to be replaced every 22 months because they get worn out being passed from one person to the next. Even faster if you leave them in your laundry. Though if you press and fold the bills immediately, they fit better in your wallet. A $100 bill usually lasts about 9 years. Guess people don't drop them in the washer quite as often. Time for an Inspector Gadget field trip fact. Every year, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing uses 10 million pounds of ink and $66 million worth of paper. Aha! A library. But not just any library. This is the Library of Congress. The staff handles over 600,000 requests from Congress each year. But before you feel left out, the public gets to use the library too. And this is some place. All books, sheet music, and film scripts copyrighted in the U.S. go through the Library of Congress, which means they've got a copy of everything but your shoe size. Their collection grows by 10 items a minute. If it gets any bigger, it can apply for statehood. Would you believe this library is so big it needs a conveyor belt to move the books around? Would you believe a dumbwaiter and 3 push carts? How about an old geezer with a shopping bag? The library contains over 100 million items, not including the 3 books I forgot to return. You can see a rough draft of the Declaration of Independence and the Gutenberg Bible, which is the first book printed with movable type. But they don't have a copy of my autobiography. Guess I have to write it first. If you laid the shelves of the library end to end, they would stretch all the way from Washington, D.C. to Detroit, making the longest and best-educated boardwalk in the world. But then the books would be piled all over the floor. And if you spent 1 minute looking at each item in the Library of Congress for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it would take you about 825 years to see everything. And you wouldn't finish one of the books. Not to mention that you'd be really old. Look at those two. They must be running away from their overdue library fees. Oh, they're jogging, and that's the mall. But you can't shop here. It's the grassy area between all the Smithsonian museums, the Washington Monument, and the Capitol Building. Speaking of the Capitol Building, this is it. It's one of the most important buildings in Washington and the nation. It's where Congress has met since 1800. By now, they must know each other very well. Inside, you can see the immense rotunda decorated with a painted mural. It has a great echo effect, which makes speeches sound important. The Capitol Rotunda has housed the coffins of several American heroes before they were buried underground. 4 of these heroes were presidents: Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy. This is the Statuary Hall, and I'm whispering because it's also known as the Whispering Hall. I'll talk normally again soon, so you don't have to adjust your set. See those red curtains? They hung them to muffle the sound. It's rumored that a long time ago, when Congress used to meet in this room, John Quincy Adams positioned his desk so that he could hear congressmen whispering on the other side of the room. He didn't even have gadget ears. Nobody could figure out how he knew what the other side was going to do before they did it. This is either the Senate subway or Washington, D.C.'s idea of an amusement park water ride. Hold the water. Actually, it's a subway that goes under the Capitol building. Anyone can ride the subway, but you've got to give up your seat if a member of Congress needs to ride. Whenever the House or Senate is in session, a flag flies over that chamber of the Capitol building. No one knows quite why. It just does. At night, a 20-foot lantern on the roof is also lit when either House of Congress is in session. In other words, Congress can and often does labor in this building, day and night, week after week, month after month. Right now, they are probably facing unbelievable challenges, heated debates, and savage public condemnation. And loving it. Did you know that lightning really does strike twice? In fact, a statue called Freedom at the top of the Capitol has been struck by lightning so many times that it wears its own lightning rods. I was only hit by lightning once, and it was plenty for me. Yup! Make that twice. Let's go to my old stomping ground. Just like my gadgets, it has unlimited firepower, the latest in weaponry, and also a rogues gallery of the most wanted criminals in recent history. The FBI building. FBI stands for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I always thought it stood for a foolish, bumbling inspector. As part of our Department of Justice, the FBI investigates violations of federal laws. So bad guys, beware. Tours include some of the worst bad guys, a collection of guns, and a portion of a laboratory. If you're lucky, maybe they'll let you pose for their mugshot camera. As one of the most powerful law enforcement agencies in the world, the FBI has more than 10,000 special agents. The agency was started in 1908 and maintains the world's largest fingerprint files. That's either the world's biggest hood ornament or we're looking at the Pentagon. It houses the Department of Defense. The Department of Offense is somewhere else. The Department of Defense is managed by the Secretary of Defense. He's such a big cheese that his office is in one of the world's largest mouse mazes, the Pentagon. It's called that because it has 5 sides. Would you believe his office building is so big he has to take a Sherman tank to the restroom? The Pentagon has 3 times the floor space of the Empire State Building, though the view from the Pentagon roof isn't nearly as spectacular. It was completed in 1943, and some of the construction workers are still trying to find their way out. Time for an Inspector Gadget field trip fact. The Pentagon has about 23,000 employees occupying over 6.5 million square feet with corridors extending for 17 and a half miles. Wowzers! There are 4,200 clocks, 691 water fountains, 7,754 windows, 13 elevators, 19 escalators, and 131 stairways. And not one vending machine that gives a decent egg salad sandwich. There's another field trip right around the corner. Or was it that corner? Or that corner? It was great visiting the White House, Washington Monument, FBI, Jefferson Memorial, and Lincoln Memorial. Truly a memorable experience. Until next time, go, go, Gadget Field Trip.